Deal.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. This is now our 19th edition of the Homes and Money Realtor Mastermind. I took last week off, got a little bit of sun, was in Florida, so thanks for obliging me with that. I'm super excited today, and honestly, just a little backstory. I had initially kind of invited Mike to participate in some of these, and I think like most of you were a little skeptical when they started. And so Patrick kind of helped talk to Mike and say, hey, there's been this massive request for your expertise. So Mike, just a heads up, and I kind of said this in an email several weeks ago when we were on one of these, a lot of the agents were talking about, you know, there always seems to be this disconnect between agents and builders. And most people would say that you're probably one of the experts in the area, and that's kind of where you've cut your niche. And when I had Scott on, Scott even said that was one of the unique things about your partnership. So I have Mike Hines here. He is the other half of Euler Hines and works with Scott. If you remember and have listened to any of the recordings, they formed a partnership. They've branded together. They have this awesome space that they work out of. And Mike's niche, again, is more builder based. So Mike, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Robert. Yeah. Appreciate you having me, and thanks for the introduction. Yeah, it was it's funny because I was in Florida last week as well. I was down in Disney with my kids having some fun. And this is, if you see this guy behind me, this is my dad, Bill Hines, behind me. So he's actually the reason I got into this stuff. He does all of our land sides. He's been a developer for a long time. So everything that you're saying, I'm getting credit for a lot of the stuff that he does behind the scenes and out there bird dogging lots and all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah. So that's a good segue and question. When you got started, did you get started on the builder side or did you get started on the real estate side?
So I got started on the development side, actually. So I'd say that's the builder side as far as that goes. So my dad's been in development for the past 40 years, doing different types of new home communities around Cincinnati, around the region, up in Columbus, in those areas. So after I graduated college, I was an urban planning major. I got started with him in 2007, working for his development company. So not exactly the most ideal time to be in development because the market obviously, crashed right after that. But that's where I was able to cut my teeth with him and my brother Bob, and my mom's been in real estate. She's a real estate agent as well. She's actually on our team now. But we were able to do that. So that's how I got started working with on the development side, on land lots, the sales and marketing side, and then started to get to know some of the builders that were out there.
Okay. And then what was the transition into real estate?
Yeah, so during that time, I'd gotten my license so early. I didn't really use it a whole lot, and then the market crashed. So for a while there, went from selling a lot of lots, 100 lots maybe a year, to selling a couple a year. So I went back to school, got my grad degree at UC, my master's in business, MBA. And after that, decided, hey, my dad and I were just saying, hey, what's the development world going to look like when the dust settles from this this downturn? So we decided to create kind of almost like a land brokerage, partner with a Coldwell Banker. And when I say partner, they held our license. We got our license through them, and just started selling land and lots and working with builders. We realized that when we were on the development side, hiring a real estate agent with a specialty in land was hard to come by. Most were really, really good at selling homes, but maybe land wasn't their specialty. So we created that in 2010 and 11 and launched that company, which was, Coldwell Banker West Shell New Homes and Land Department, and just started really slowly working our way in and learning the brokerage side of it. My dad knew the land side really well. I got to learn a lot from him to do that, but then we married it up with the building component of that. So finding land and lots, single family teardowns, small single family developments, and then bringing in the builders to complement each other. So we had the inventory for them, they had the product of what to build, and then we would sell that for builders on that front. So it's essentially how we got here.
Okay. And so then do you also serve as like the sales rep for that builder, or is it like you just sell the land, the lots to them, and then you're out?
Yeah, so there's a few different capacities that we act. So we like to say we're operational to the builder. So what that means is the builder uses us for pretty much three different avenues. One is most important, which is the land acquisition side, so finding opportunities. We all know, just like finding a resale home is really hard to find, finding a new construction opportunity to build a home, whether it's a series of lots in a development or just one-offs, it's really hard to find. So that's the first component. The second and third are sales and marketing. So we do, either I'm one of their salespeople or we have other members of our team that are their sales folks. And then we also have our marketing department that handles their marketing. Now, that can be a range. It can be anything from a high-end custom builder that does 7 to 10 homes a year. That can also be a midline semi-production builder that does 40 or 50 homes a year, like Ashford or John Henry. So we do different things for different folks, but those three components, land search, sales, and marketing, are what we offer to them. And we're pretty much part of their company, almost like their departments for those sections. So that's how we operate there.
Okay, cool. And so you mentioned that it's kind of a family affair. What does your team look like in the team structure?
Yeah. So you mentioned Scott Euler. So my dad and I, when we started Build Collective, which was the natural evolution of what the new Homes and Land Department became, we merged with Scott Euler's team, Euler Group, and so Build Collective and Euler Group became Euler Hines. So the way it works right now is Scott heads up all of the resale side. So anything from a traditional sales of an existing home, that's Scott and our resale team. So, different buyers agents, which we try not to call them buyers agents because they do listings, they can do new construction, they can do buyers, they can do everything along those lines. That's that silo of business, which obviously blends over to the new construction. Then on the new construction side, I run the new construction division. My dad runs the land division. And these two components kind of work together with our different builders. And then we hire different sales folks, and we have underneath of us, I shouldn't say underneath of us because it's really lateral. We have different agents, like Bobby, my brother, represents a couple of different builders with us. And then we have our marketing department as well, that we all work together on every account that we have from a builder's perspective. And we're not a massive company. I know, making it sound like we're bigger than we are. We represent a handful, 7, 8 maybe builders at any given time, because we don't want anybody to overlap. But essentially it's me on the strategy, my dad trying to find land and lot opportunities, a salesperson that helps them sell, meets with the clients, meet with the agents, that sort of thing. And then there's our marketing department that helps feed and create all the different content, brochures, those sorts of things that help put it all together. So it's come through a few different iterations over the years, but we've settled in pretty well from here, and it's working pretty well. We're lucky to have some good builder partners, some great people as part of the team as well, that can really gain some traction and get some respect out there in the industry.
Yeah, and I mean, your success follows that too. You're constantly in the top 150, part of a large team, so it's fantastic.
Thank you.
So question, I guess, and this can maybe open up discussion a little early. I have a couple of questions, but the first one is, there's this hunger to have your expertise. Why do you feel like there's such a disconnect between real estate agents and builders? What do you feel like the stigma is?
I feel like for a long time, it's a good question, first off, because I don't know if there's going to be a direct answer of why there's the disconnect, other than that they're just two different groups, right? So, real estate agents kind of focus over here, builders focus over here. And quite frankly, they do two different things. So the conversation between the two doesn't always marry up. When you're dealing with a buyer or seller, you're dealing with somebody that wants the property, and they're dealing with somebody that wants to sell the property, and everybody's on the same page. In the building side, there's so much that's going on with that. So it's not that builders don't want to deal with real estate agents. They just have a lot going on. So I think sometimes their lack of attention on the real estate agent side isn't from, it's damn sure they don't want to not pay agents, because I know most builders have no issue with it whatsoever, especially if they're bringing clients to it. I can't speak for some of the really large production builders, but even they've kind of changed their mentality on that front. But I think the disconnect really is just the process. I think people don't understand on the agent side what the process is always going to look like, because there's 20 different processes that every builder has different, right? So like one builder does it one way, another builder does it a different way. So I think that that concern of not understanding exactly how it's gonna walk through gives real estate agents a pause, because they are concerned they're going to take their client through, it's going to be a bad experience. And from a builder perspective, they're saying, hey, this agent doesn't get me, they don't understand why I work this way, so it's not marrying up. Now that's kind of where we come in, is like, hey, call us. So we got a call from an agent the other day. We have nothing to do with this deal that she's a part of, and she just wanted some advice. Hey, does this sound right? So once you get maybe an impartial view or an unbiased view of whether something sounds right, and if you just give them that confidence, like, yeah, that's pretty typical, there's no worry there, then that concern is alleviated and is good shape, so they can kind of follow the path forward on that. It's just truly knowledge of understanding it, and it's almost impossible for a real estate agent that does even a lot of deals to understand it, because they haven't been through that specific builder's process before, and it may be different than the build they just did, so it may seem wrong, right? So that's all it is. It's just being on two different paths, and not always understanding eye to eye exactly why the other does it one way versus that, because we both know they're both working pretty damn hard, and they're both doing things their way, and it works for them. So
Do you feel like, yeah, do you feel like there's animosity sometimes between a sales rep at a builder and the real estate agent, because they worry about having their toes stepped on?
Yeah, but I think here's, if it were me, and I'll put myself in the builder rep position for a second, is sometimes the hardest part is you're having the same conversation twice, is when you're having it with the client and you're having it with the agent. And I think that's probably where the stream of communication probably could be better. It's not the agent's fault. It's the client also is calling the builder rep. So you have multiple strings of communication going on. But most good builder reps know that the agent's there to help facilitate the transaction. And I think what's always helpful is if an agent shares where they're maybe a novice, or maybe they don't know everything on that, and maybe that sales rep also is like, hey, how do you like to have this work? Asking the right questions on both sides alleviates the concerns in the beginning, because then they can truly understand what we're trying to get at. But there is animosity, and I think it's driven by the thought that is driven by the commission. It's not driven by the commission. It's just driven by the uncertainty of what's going on. So I think the commission always gets a bad word, or a bad vibe, because people think that's what they're only there for. It's not true at all. I can speak to a lot of agents that are busting their butt for their client, and sometimes what they get paid isn't worth, it's worth much more than what they actually get paid. Occasionally, we get lucky and we don't have to work hard on the deal, and it kind of falls together perfectly, but those are the exceptions, not the rules, right? So I think that's really where the animosity comes from, is just them being on two different pages.
Okay. Along that same line, and I think this comes up quite a bit. How does an agent protect themselves from, I think some of that animosity sometimes is that and maybe it's a false stigma, but I'm sure it's happened in the past where the builder tries to get the buyer to come direct without the agent. Is there a way that the agent can protect themselves in those scenarios?
The first thing I'll say, being on both sides of that, we represent buyers that are building new homes. We represent builders that are, obviously trying to sell new homes. The first thing to do is just make sure you're transparent with your client. Like that, just make sure you're doing everything you can. Typically, when a client goes rogue and off directly to the builder, it's because we haven't talked to them as much as we should. We just had this happen a week ago. The client went directly to the builder and said, hey, I found this property myself. Well, if we were having conversations with them a couple times a week and really understanding what they were out there doing, probably get a better grasp on it. Most builders don't care that they're paying a commission. They're happy to pay the commission on there. There are the exceptions that are out there just saying, hey, I never even met this agent. How do I know that they were actually a part of this deal? They're just saying this after the fact. That's tough. You just need I think the biggest key is just making sure your client understands that you're there to represent them no matter what, whether they go to a new build. Explain to them up front, say, hey, if you go to a builder on your own, you have to mention me. This is it. Get a buyer agency signed if you can. That's really key, because then that forces you to have that conversation with the client to make sure they understand it. Then there's always documents that you can send over to the builder. Most builders aren't going to sign anything additional because they're like, hey, I got you covered. I know our builders, I can't think of a time that we've ever had any commission dispute between an agent and a builder, because the builder just maybe it's because we're listing the property and we know from the agent perspective that, hey, their client could call us directly. And then as long as they tell us they have an agent, we're going to go ahead and call that agent right after the fact. So I don't know if there's anything they can do to protect themselves fully, but I'll say the first thing is definitely talk to your client. Make sure you have that conversation up front if they're going to consider new construction. And even if they don't talk about it, talk to them about it. So you're presenting that as an option to them. And then from there, call around to the builders that may fit what they're looking for and send an email to them with their name. You can always do that. There is a form that the board of the realtors offers, and even the HBA has as well, that you can utilize as well. But I know some builders are just like, I'm not signing that. Just tell them, to come with the client and we're all good. So I know that's not giving you certainty on there. Everything I just said, I'm a culprit as well of always not following those exact rules. So that you should know that. But just the more you can make your customer loyal to you from doing good work will probably help you more than anything else, any other piece of paper that's out there that you can have signed, any email you can send out there.
Yeah. And again, I'm not a real estate agent, but I guess some of what you're saying is advising the client upfront that even though it's a contract to build, it's still also a real estate contract. And that is why they should still use a real estate agent and your value in the transaction.
Absolutely. I'll say this 100 times out of 100 is that it's important to be represented when you go through new construction, and there's so much that can go wrong, and it's such a long timeline, assuming you're buying, a house that hasn't been started yet, that's a long timeline. That's 6 to 12 months that can happen. So you need somebody there. So the value proposition should not be difficult for an agent to share with their client. But the problem is sometimes if the agent doesn't feel confident in it, they may not share it as an option, and they may even skirt the client away. And that's sometimes why the client ends up going new construction on their own, because the agent hasn't brought that out. So call me if you have questions. I mean it, like our whole business is built on having builders be good to agents. So whatever we can do to make that process better, if you are more comfortable having one client build a home, the next time that your next client that may be interested, we may have that listing and you may feel even more comfortable that time. So it can help us. So whatever we can do to help facilitate that for you as well. That's why we're here. So to answer your question, as far as what the client should, or what the agent should do to protect themselves, is just have the conversation. It's that simple. I think that's the best thing they can do.
So you mentioned that you work with 7 or 8 builders on a regular basis. Would you advise agents? So let me back up. We have an inventory problem. We've talked about this all 19 weeks. I believe, and I'm sure you as well believe, that there's this extreme need for land so that we can build more houses, so that we can have more inventory. Every time a new house gets built, essentially that not only helps a new house being built, which creates one house, but like in your department or your company, that also means that they might be listing a house and moving into a new house. So you might get 2 out of that, not just one.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this need for more land. And would you advise that as people are starting to need this more, that on a proactive basis, you kind of, as an agent, identify 5, 6, 7, builders that you're creating relationships with, so that when a client comes to you and says, I'd like to entertain new construction, you can say, all right, here's where we should start, right?
Yes.
Is that kind of how you would advise this to work with agents on an ongoing basis?
Absolutely. I think we've had a lot of success here is we do buyer consults for all of our buyers. So when an agent comes in, or when a client comes in and says, hey, I want to buy a house, and it's maybe it's a sphere or somebody that just reaches out to us out of the blue, is we try to get them in the office for a meeting. And if it's not in the office, it's on a Zoom call. And during that conversation, we talk about everything. We talk about, hey, there's not a whole lot on the market. What areas are you looking for? Okay, hey, that's going to be tough to find. Have you ever considered new construction? Would you? And then if they say, well, yeah, we'd love to have something new. Well, do you have time to build? Or would you like to try to find a market house? So just having those conversations up front. And then from there, once you kind of get a scope of what they're looking for, you start to go out and say, okay, hey, you know what? With what you're looking for, I think there's a few different builders that we should probably look into, or you may not know. You may say, gosh, they're looking for a new build in High Park. Who the heck is doing that? Well, I'm guessing you probably know some other folks. I'm not the only one that does this. There's Angela Pusateri, who's a great one. There's Michael Hinckley that knows builders. Misha and Glacier. I mean, there's all kinds of agents out there that you can just pick up the phone and say, hey, kind of client that's looking for this or there. So then you find out before them, you have access to this information quicker, find out who the key players are and let them know that, and send them an email, say, hey, you know what? I know that new construction may not be the top of your list, but in case you do go that route, here's some different options. So that's where being proactive and having the conversation will get that going. So if you know more than them and you're the expert in that area, they're going to trust you and keep following along with you. It's when that they can feel that you don't really know that route that they end up going rogue. But yes, to answer your question, is that's it. You just need to do a little bit of research. Even if you don't know the area, it's really quick and easy to find out. You can call me, you can call a dozen people. You can do a few Google searches based on the area to find out what builders are out there, what MLS listings, what developments are happening. And then you go from there and present that information to the customer.
Great. And then on the side where a buyer comes to you and says, I want to build, but I have a house to sell. How do you advise that process to work in terms of starting a process with the builder with a deposit, et cetera, picking a site, but then also listing the house? And now, I mean, maybe not so much in 2023, but in 2022, 2021, and even 2020, it seemed like there were a lot longer lease backs. Are you still seeing that now on the listing side? What do you recommend that agents do on that side?
So there's a couple of key factors that go in there. So first, lease backs, yes, we're still seeing those. They're not quite as long, but I mean, if it's a great house, they can still dictate the terms. We were just talking about this yesterday. You're still seeing lots of multiple offers. So the sellers, if it's a good house, priced well, and there's good demand, you're going to be in pretty good shape on that front. When it comes to the selling your current house to get into the new construction house, there's no one size fits all. There's different variables. And I'll go through a couple of different ones. Like the first is it a market house being built actively right now, or is it a pre-sale? Once you figure out the timeline, that's going to tell you a little bit more about what you should do with your house. And then, so let's just say it's a market house. It's going to be done in 4 months. Well, the house will be done in around 4 months. You need to add a little buffer on there. So maybe we should list your house in 3 months, ask for some more time, or 2 months, depending on how it's going to be, and maybe ask for time to that. So that's the first component of it, is just understanding the timeline. The next component on that is understanding, like, what's your client's comfort or what's your client's threshold for discomfort? Would they move twice because they want to make more money on their house now because it's the spring market, rather than wait till the fall or in December to sell their house? Like, so if they say, hey, I want to make as much money on this and I'll rent, or I can live with in-laws or live with parents, I'll do that. So you find out that threshold. Next after that is the financing side. You got to understand, like, what does their financing look like? Do they have to sell to buy? Because sometimes you do. Sometimes you have to sell to buy. Is it a construction loan that you're getting from the builder, or is it an end loan? And that's a bigger conversation, of course. End loan is going to be when the house is finished, you close. Construction loan means you close in front. All kinds of different iterations in there that you need to talk to the lender and get that figured out. So those three components are so important to understand, is like, okay, just understanding timeline, understanding what your client, are they willing to be just, uncomfortable for a bit, just to make sure that they have all their ducks in a row. And then of course the financing side. Once you know those three things, and you can't, here's the biggest issue with that, you can't know all of that until you identify a house that you're going to buy. So you can ask some preloaded questions, but until you find that exact house, you may not know all the questions to ask just yet. So if it's a market house, it's a different set of questions than if it's a build to suit, which means they're building the whole thing, design, everything. So you just got to be asking those questions strategically along the way to be understanding your client. The more you know and you spend time with your client, you're going to understand that for them, what's in their best interest. And then you share with them options. So house to sell is a really hard one. And just know you won't get it perfect. Tell the client that. Say, hey, it is impossible to perfectly time this. And if we do, we're super lucky. Nobody's that good. But it's going to be impossible to do it. And if you do it, just know that if you are trying to time it, things can go wrong. A sale can fall through, if something can happen. So just know that the risk of it, if you're trying to have it too tight and have it be just perfect on that front.
Okay, on the timing front, and this was something that came up a couple of weeks ago. Um, it's taking longer to build now, and we've come through scenarios where costs were higher, et cetera. So some people have said that, and maybe these aren't the builders that you work with, but I'm going to try and see if you know how to navigate this. When you have a new development, there's signs in the front of the development say starting at whatever, right? So clients get into contract maybe 6 months ago, 8 months ago, and they're in the process of building. But then the builder, because they want eyeballs and to attract new buyers, slashes that sign up front that says starting at this. How do you navigate that scenario with builder and buyer when a builder slashes their prices to maybe sell the last couple of lots and your buyer's calling you saying, Mike, this doesn't seem right. Now they've reduced the cost, but I'm already in process.
So, and I guess so the question you're asking, meaning they've reduced the price, the buyer's already under contract, and then they reduce the price for future homes?
Yeah, for starting at and the base price on their models, which doesn't happen a lot, but going into 2023, it seems like it's happening more because you're trying to get traffic.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, here's the thing is like their cost of building is not coming down. So the odds are if they're doing that, it's for a few different reasons. One is it's an inferior lot or an inferior product, right? So like meaning the house is cheaper, the lot's not as good. Premium lot, my dad says this all the time, is like, people will pay through the nose for a premium lot. And it's like always price your best lot way higher than the other ones because people will pay for that. So when it comes to it, is like you can't worry about what's going to happen in the future as long as you're asking the right questions in the present. So like, if you're under a contract and you see they slash prices, the only way they're doing that is either they're reducing their profit margin, they're selling an inferior product to what you're doing. It really shouldn't affect you unless you're the first or second one in, and then everything after that is super cheap. And that's happened. That happened in 2009, 10, 11, right? So right now it's a different marketplace. You're seeing them probably just to move inventory, lower pricing just to keep things going. But I doubt they're lowering it by hundreds of thousands of dollars. It may be by tens of thousands just to move it because something wasn't perfect with that. The good products, the good homes are still selling in good neighborhoods. So it just depends on where you are. Infill is a little bit different than once you get out into the burbs where you're in Ryan Homes, MI, Fisher Trees, because you may see that a little bit more. But if you ask the right questions up front and you know where the trajectory of the neighborhood, it's established, the critical mass has been built, you shouldn't have that problem. But just know you can't guard against every scenario, and it's just not possible at all. As long as you're there with your client at these meetings when they're talking to the sales rep, so you hear it first. The worst is when you're not there and then you hear secondhand from your client what's going on. That's never good, because then you don't really know what did your client really hear versus what was actually said, because they are two different things sometimes.
Sure. Awesome. Great answer. Okay. I've got one last question, guys, and then you guys can get ready to ask Mike some questions. Okay, Mike.
Sure.
And I'm not asking for selfish reasons, because I think that this happens a lot. How do you navigate or suggest that people navigate the builder having their own financing and you having a buyer that's pre-approved with somebody that you have a good relationship with? I know from talking to Scott, you guys have relationships that you like to use. Everybody on this call has somebody that they like to use. And the builder says, oh, we'll give you, and you mentioned Ryan, so I'm going to go back to them, years ago. We'll give you a free morning room, or we'll finish your basement, or we'll do this. What is the best way to navigate that conversation and use your quote fiduciary to your buyer in that process?
I think you always have to lean into what's best for the buyer, right? I mean, I think when it comes down to it, is some scenarios where the builder in-house lending is a great solution for them because they save a heck of a lot of money. They're saving money. They're saving the buyer money because they've negotiated down their title company, and then they're getting a piece of the pie on the loan itself. So I think explaining that to your client just to understand, like, this isn't free. Here's why you're getting it. Here's why you're getting those things included. Here's the benefit of doing it, but this way. So I think if you explain the pros and cons of the builder lender, and then you also explain of their lender that may be an agent recommended person, or the client may have come already with, a loyal partner that they wanted to use. Explain the differences on those and just make sure that the client understands it. And if they understand it, they're going to probably choose what's best for them. Now, that doesn't mean that the sales rep's not going to just hone in and just sell the crap out of it, because they're incentivized to sell that as well. It's just like when you go buy a car and they're trying to get you to buy a warranty, what's really behind that. And I think if you articulate that, I think it's harder when you're coming at it from a selfish perspective of, hey, you have to use this person because it's easier for me. I know this person. I know it's going to go through. They've never experienced that. They don't care. It's more of like, hey, here's the value for you to do it this way. Here's the value for you to do it this way. Here's my experience on both occasions. And this is why I think, if it were me personally, maybe I'd go this route, but it has to be up to you. I think you got to take yourself out of it, but explain the merits of it. We have a lender that works with one of our builders right now, and he's not always the most competitive, but he always gets things closed and there's no issues with it. Now, we've had other people that, because they get a discount on the title company, they get a discount on some points on the loan itself. There's some pretty good advantages to using their lender. However, is it always going to be as smooth? Do you know that person? Does it feels good going through the transaction? Maybe not. So there may be some bumps and bruises. So I use that example of like, it's somebody that may not be one of our go-tos in the outside world when we're selling resales and that sort of thing. But for this builder, it's a pretty damn good fit for his clients. And he encourages and really incentivizes us and them to pitch that. We don't force anybody to do it though. So I know that's a tough one. And I can't say that I would always recommend using the builder's reps. Builders lenders. I know obviously, Robert, you guys do what you do and you guys are very good at it. So I think you just got to set them up side by side and know that, hey, whatever's the best for the client's got to win. That's the objective I would take.
Mike, do you, and maybe it's rare, but do you feel like sometimes those incentives that are being offered are more on a bait and switch scenario, not intentionally, but it's offered and then you find out like they haven't pulled credit yet. They don't know. And then all of a sudden they come back to your client and say, hey, I'm sorry, we're not able to do this. And you got to be careful that you don't burn that relationship with your other financing person that's already pre-approved them, Yeah. And again, Mike knows this. I don't know if everybody on the call knows this, but the way that a finance person makes money is typically getting some type of spread or points on the rate. And so if I'm a builder and I say, I'm going to give you a $20,000 option, it's not likely that I'm making $20,000 on the loan, but there's my cost portion of that I might be making off of the spread of that interest rate. And so then if they pull credit on your client and the client score is a lot lower, they may not get the same spread that they were thinking when they opened the initial incentive. So Mike, do you see that often where it's like, hey, we'll give you this, and then they go through the pre-approval process and they pull back the reins a little bit?
There's no doubt. And that goes into a bunch of different facets of the build side. Is like, hey, when at your first or second meeting, it looks really great. And the next thing you know, as you find out more, you're like, oh, that wasn't included. And then I got to worry about this and the point. So like, there's no doubt. I should say too, that most of what we do is in a little bit on the higher end. So where you see that in most cases is on the probably entry level new builds from 200,000 to maybe $500,000-$600,000. You see that a lot more there because it's all about that first meeting. Their whole idea in that first meeting when you sit down with a client is figure out what it's going to take to convert you right there at the table. So just so you know, like, so they're offering everything they can throw at you to get you signed up, ready to go, low deposits, all that kind of stuff. So that's their whole goal on that. So yes, I mean, there's no doubt about it, is they're going to throw those. It's not just the lending side, but it could be a bait and switch. And once they find out more and they open up, your credit application, whereas your lender, if you've already been pre-approved and pre-underwritten and all that sort of thing, that's substantial. You already know yourself. So at the very least, when they're offering that, don't commit to it right away. Maybe you say, hey, I want to look at my options here to see what we're doing. So try not to commit just at the table because they're offering and dangling a little carrot in front of you, as far as that goes. Again, sometimes there's an occasion where it's something so good that you're like, how do I pass this up? And that happens sometimes. But just know that like that $20,000 morning room you just talked about, it's probably a $10,000 morning room that they're marking up to look like $20,000. And so like you're actually not getting the dollar for dollar value that they're laying on that front. And that's they play these games and they're very good at it. It is key. They have to make money. It's on the brokerage world. I'll turn it around is like, we have in-house lenders with Coldwell Banker and Keller Williams and Sipsey Klein, and it's the same thing, right? It's like, they ask you to push those, and some are fantastic products, some are great lenders, but there may be a better lender out there for that client. It's the same game that we're all trying to play to some degree. And I always feel like if you have the client's best intentions at heart and you're not there to kind of shove anything down their throat as an agent, you just present the options and present the merits of it, you're going to be in good shape. But you are right. I mean, Robert, like it's funny to listen in and hear the value prop or the positioning or storyline that some of these salespeople, because some of them are really good at it and some of them maybe are still learning it. So you can kind of see right through it, and the savvier clients figure it out pretty fast. But other ones that are new to this process may not understand exactly what they're doing. They just see an opportunity there to save some money or to get a bonus feature. So.
Yeah. And I'm going to go back to one of the things you said at the beginning. Mike said he just got back from Disney with his kids. So when you're talking about needing a builder to make some money, everybody needs to make some money. I think about, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I think about Lion King and the Circle of Life, right? Everybody needs to benefit because we actually need builders to be building houses to help our inventory problem. So you want builders to be profitable so that they can go buy more lots and build more houses and satisfy needs. So it's not that we want to cut anybody out. You need everybody to win. An agent needs to win, a finance person needs to win, a builder needs to win, a title company needs to win. Everybody needs to win. I think Bishnu Karel said this on his talk where he said it's a team and everybody has to profit. So
yes. And going off that, like, it's funny you bring up the Disney World is like, they're obviously, they do nickel and dime you. They get you a lot of different areas, but what, the experience is so great, for you and the kids and everything like that, that it's worth it. Right. So I think that's just it. It's like the experience with a new build. It's when they start going off track and the customer journey is just wonky and just out of whack. And then the consumer's like, God, I'm getting hit over here and over here. But if you're transparent and talk to everybody up front and understand where you're going, it's going to make the process go a heck of a lot smoother on this. And I should say this too, is like, just as I advocate every day for real estate, the agent side, I'll advocate just as much for the builder side too, because knowing these builders, these men and women that are running the companies, yes, they're there to make money, but I'd say the overwhelming majority want to treat the customer really well because they know their business is based on other referrals and other experiences. They may have missteps, they may make mistakes, they may have an upset client or two, but in the overwhelming majority, they're making the right decisions when they're put up against the wall and something's going on that's not perfect. So just know that, like, I think that's where the animosity comes. It's like, this is the greedy builder trying to make money, or this is the greedy real estate agent just trying to be out there for the commission. It's both wrong. It's somewhere in the middle where they're both just trying to make a living and do well and make sure their companies or their business is going well. Just remember that when you're advocating for your client, don't be so hard to try to push for what you think your client needs and try to win against the builder. And I'd say the same thing to the builder. Don't try to win against the client or the agent. Just meet them in the middle, because it's a lot better that way than trying to flex your muscles and show them like, yep, I won. I'm going to show this builder that I know what I'm talking about for my client, and I'm going to just impress them at the table. It's not needed. Just speak up when you have some good value, but stay quiet and ask the right questions if you don't know, what exactly, you're talking about at that moment.
Sure. Okay, who's got a question for Mike? I've asked a bunch. I know you guys have some. It looks like Patrick turned his camera on, so I think he's got one.
What's up, Patrick?
Oh, there we go. Sorry. Hey, Mike. Good to see you, man. I want to start by just saying that of all of the real estate agents that I've met throughout my time in this industry, and not being a real estate agent, the dynamic that you carry through your business is unmatched, in my opinion. I truly I look at you as industry leaders, especially now with your connection and your growth on the residential side through Euler as well. But like from the builder standpoint specifically, even before that merger, I was an advocate for what you were doing, and the service standards that you guys provide is unbelievable. So thank you for that and doing it the right way. Um, and then one of my questions from like a client side to a realtor who's representing on a builder would be, as that 6 to 12 month process plays out, there's a lot of dead time where the realtor doesn't need to be involved. But the client is like, what's going on with my project? What's going on? Do you guys have things in place to stay connected? I mean, obviously you talked about, people dip into the builder side and trying to cut you out or everything like that. But like, do you have stuff in place to try to stay engaged with those clients? And I don't want to take all your secrets or anything like that, but like just on the surface level.
No, actually, that's a phenomenal question, because that's something that, as far as a process in our CRM, we try to do monthly check-ins. So, we use Follow Up Boss, and in Follow Up Boss, you can create smart lists, which are basically, your clients in different segments. But our standard rule of thumb is if you have a new build going on with a client and you represent the buyer, if you represent the builder, it's a little different, of course, but if you represent the buyer, rule of thumb is once a month, you should be contacting them. Go swing by the house, take some photos. Like, you'd be shocked how much people appreciate noticing things and checking in and asking questions. It's just that's where I think actually everything goes wrong a little bit, is from the time of contract, you're there, you're present, you're listening to everything. And then afterwards, the client starts having all these conversations directly with the builder. You can't avoid that. That's going to happen. To be there and present for every conversation is impossible. And in fact, you should encourage them to have conversations directly with them. But if you're calling every few weeks, every month to check in and say, hey, what's going on? What can I help with? I stopped by the house and I noticed this. Is this right? That sort of thing is so important, just because then your client doesn't feel like they were just left. And I know that a lot of agents, they don't mean to do that, but they just get distracted with what's front and center at that moment. They have another client that's needing a lot of their attention. But definitely try to make it, if you're doing a new build, at least once a month, reach out. And if you could do it twice a month, that would be even better. And stop by the house for progress updates, call the builder, ask how things are going, if they need any help with your client as well. I think that just helps for the relationship as well once you get all finished up. So That's a good question. And I should say, we haven't always been that great at doing that. We learned the hard way that when a problem would always arise and it'd be too late for us to solve if we're hearing about the problem when it's coming up, versus being proactive and calling the client as things are, because a problem doesn't all of a sudden just show up one day. It's normally a cascading effect and growing, and then one day it just goes over the edge. So that helps us.
That's awesome, man. Thank you.
By the way, Patrick, like if you guys have questions, there's things we've learned the hard way. So if anybody has questions, they're going through an experience right now that they just need a hand with, I mean, pick up the phone and call, and I try to call every single person back that I can within 24 hours. We don't get that many phone calls. But if there's anybody that has a question, they're going through a tough one, please consider us a resource.
Absolutely.
Tim, Lindsay, questions? Dustin?
I probably have one more, unless you got one, Tim.
No, not so much a question, man. I haven't been in the industry long enough to really say I've done a lot of new builds, but I do appreciate your knowledge and sharing it on the call. And anytime I get to put face with a name, because obviously I've heard Euler Hines, just being around Patrick and the producers and stuff, it's awesome to just be able to put a face with your name. And I appreciate you sharing your knowledge and dropping some info on us.
Of course. Well, hey, just remember, like, you always got to start with doing one or two new builds, and every one that I've learned something new. So it's funny. We just had an agent that she's doing her first one, and she was concerned that she didn't know what she was doing. I like just ask questions. The best thing ever is make us feel just like you're doing now. You're feeding to my ego right now, right? Asking me questions like I know everything. I definitely don't, and I'm learning. But like the more you ask questions to other folks, they're happy to be receptive. It's when we pretend that we know what we're talking about when we don't. So if that helps at all, I'm literally learning on every deal I have. I have something new pop up that comes up. So, and you will always have that. It'll never be just, run of the mill, right? But it's good to meet you though, man.
Thank you. Yeah, it's nice to meet you too. I think my biggest strength is when I don't know something, I just ask the questions, and that was great advice. And I kind of perked up when I heard you talking about that. Like, well, I've sat at a couple of those closings, and I'm going, God, I hope they don't see through me. I'm just learning at this point. Everything's new knowledge to me, so I appreciate that. It makes me feel like I'm on the right track.
No, you are. And if your client will understand too, just if you say to them like, hey, I don't have an experience with this builder. Like, you don't have to say, I don't have experience in new builds. Like, I haven't worked with this builder yet, but let's find out some of the details together. They'll feel good. I mean, there's hundreds of builders in Cincinnati. So chances are
awesome.
Most people have not worked with that builder at that time,
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, and Michael, I know you've done new builder seminars, either at the Remington Room or wherever. From that approach, what type of clientele are you pulling in? Are you pulling in people who have built before? Are you pulling in people who've never built? Are you, or what is your target? I actually had a friend who's interested in building, and I tagged him on your post, and she was going to go. I don't know if she did. Long story, whatever. But I was like, the knowledge that you're probably going to get from there is great. So like moving forward, as you guys maybe do those in the future, like are you targeting people who've never built before? Is it a seminar for anybody who's built, or what are you thinking?
For anybody. So that one was just a seminar for anybody that's exploring the new construction process. I'll say this, even if somebody's built before, they've probably not experienced the same build that they're going to go through next. So the progression is typically you start with more of a production oriented builder, and then you graduate into maybe more higher end custom as you go through it. So there's always something to learn from a client's perspective. So anybody will have different, like we're going to do one on a tax abatement here coming up as well. They all going to have a little bit different of a niche. And then we'll have one on custom building here coming up, probably later part of this year. So really, it's just anybody that can come can learn something. I can guarantee you that there'll be something, maybe not for me, but one of the other panelists that's on there.
Sure.
Share some kind of nugget that'll be good. I always say, like, if you listen to something and you get like one or two good takeaways, it's probably worthwhile. Nobody's saying anything nowadays that's groundbreaking, right? I'm probably not saying anything really impressive that you're like, oh wow, that's changing my whole life. But
No, you've changed my whole life, Mike. You've changed my whole life, buddy.
That was my goal today, just but no, I think that's it. Is like just take a few nuggets away, and the very least you come and you meet some people, right?
Awesome.
You say hey to some other folks. So that's what's so great about your stuff, Patrick, is in this podcast. This is what we're doing right here is, Robert, like you just connecting people get, put a face to a name. I get to meet a few of you guys. We just get exposed to more and more, and we learn more. So the breadth of what we know and the confidence just grows. So that's just the best part about it.
It's awesome.
Yeah, I just want to kind of close with this story, and this goes back to what Mike was saying about proactively walking the house. So almost 18 years ago, my wife and I built with a custom builder, and everybody knows this. When you're building, you go by the house almost daily to see what progress has been made, and you get angry because something hasn't happened. You don't understand that the flooring guy is tied up on 2 other jobs before he can make it to yours, or that your bathtub's on back order. You don't know all that stuff, right? And so the funny thing that happened with ours was that we had a port window, one of those round windows that was supposed to be put in our master closet. And our agent called us and said, hey, don't freak out, but if you go to the house today, they put your port window in the master shower. Don't worry, I've already called the builder and we're getting it fixed. So like, instead of me getting, extremely upset and calling the builder or calling her first, she kind of came to me and said, we've already seen it. We know about it. I've told the project manager about it and they're fixing it. So it just helped me know that I don't have to overreact about this. And so I think that's what Mike was saying, that you can help the builder, you can help your client. They're going out there, but if you act like you know what's going on with the build and that you intervene in some situations, you'll help manage everybody's level of emotion.
That's you hit the nail on the head, is like noticing things before other people notice them, like before the client notice them it's worth, I mean, it's just communication and being proactive. Like, I think a client's biggest frustration is when they're the first to notice a mistake. And it's like, yeah, every detail about your house. There may be a dozen other people that only know 50% of what they're doing at that day. Right. So I think that's just it. Like, just being present and being there as an advocate. So you're totally right. Your agent, I mean, that's a veteran move right there, is to be out there, notice it, remember that it was supposed to be somewhere else, and notice that the problem was there, because a lot of agents would have walked through that house and not had any idea that that was a mistake. Right. So I think that's it, is just for our clients, if we can be there for them and then also show them we're paying attention, I think that helps. It's a good story, because I think may have to share that one actually at our staff meeting tomorrow. I just did.
Well, and you may know the agent. It was Sandra Brown. I know she's kind of not doing as much as she used to do, but she was a Coldwell Banker agent back in the day.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, totally.
All right. Well, Mike, I appreciate it. I think this has been fantastic. There was a need for this, and there still is a need for this. This is going to be recorded, so Mike, you'll be able to use it. Anybody else can reference this. But I appreciate it. Next week, I'm excited. Another person that Patrick told me I had to have on the show. He's ghosting on here right now, but it's Dustin Walters. Dustin is a young guy, super excited, and does a lot of good business right now. And so Dustin's going to be my guest next week. So I appreciate that. Mike, thank you so much.
Oh, no problem. Hey, I look forward to it. Hopefully I'll listen in next week to you, Dustin. I appreciate you guys spending some time with me, and hopefully we got some out of it.
Yep.
Yeah, it was awesome, Mike. Thanks for doing that, man.
Of course. Anytime.
Right.
You guys
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Patrick, Dustin, Robert. Good seeing you guys.
See ya.
See y'all. Bye.